We must change our minds. Business as usual will lead to exacerbated conflict over resources and turf, and eventually thermonuclear catastrophe. If the evolution of consciousness is not the way to solve the world's problems, then I don't know what it is. Well, the psychedelics were originally described as consciousness-expanding drugs. That was the phenomenological description of what they were. We need to intervene in our own psyches. We cannot afford the luxury of an unconscious mind that can throw up a Hitler or a Khomeini. We cannot afford the unexamined obsessive behavior pattern that leads us into a conditioned response when somebody leans on our territory or insults our racial heritage or something like that. We have to realize that it is going to take creative intellectual engineering to steer us through the narrow valley of being. And it's always been that way. This is what shamanism is using plants to balance and control what is otherwise an extremely violence-prone, neurotic species.
Everybody was drinking bourbon, scotch, beer, and wine. They was feeling just fine. So I go to the bar, to my bartender. I said, look, man, come on down here. You got down there, so what you want? One bourbon, one scotch, one beer. And I ain't seen my baby since I don't know when. Mr. Bartender.
Alan,
Ladies and gentlemen,
you were having a nightmare. What if it's true?
ladies and gentlemen,
Alan, it's a possibility, isn't it?
the very word secrecy is repugnant
Secrets.
in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers
Constant, extreme danger.
which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger,
Extreme danger.
that an announced need for increased security
This is Conspiracy Queries with Alan Hart.
will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
You're crazy.
And no officious, high or low, civilian or military, should interpret my words here tonight as an excuse to censor the news, to stifle dissent, to cover up our mistakes.
Isn't the Pentagon suspicious that all of building would blow up?
Or to withhold from the press and the public
I think you're just looking at things for the first time.
the facts they deserve to know.
You've had your whole f***ing life to think things over. What good's a few minutes more gonna do you now?
The facts they deserve to know. They deserve to know. Deserve to know. Deserve to know.
Hey, you're listening to Green Crush Conspiracy Queries, episode 117 and 45. Here we go.
Facts they deserve to know.
To have achieved on an elevated
Okay, welcome to Green Crush Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park. It's another show, another fine summer day, and we'll get right to it. We have some news, and we have a guest, and that's how we do things here, and then we squeeze a little bit of news on afterwards. My name is Alan Park. I'm a stage 4 cancer kind of guy, supposed to have been killed already by this disease, which they offered no respite from at the hospital system here in a very major city, Toronto. Said you don't have any choices. You're just going to have to take this drug and go away and die somewhere. I had my choice of where, so that's nice. But I didn't feel like taking them up on what they were saying, that there were no options and that I had nothing else I could do. I didn't believe that. Basically the same bunch of people that would sell us a Camel cigarette and tell us it's the best kind of cigarette. I know that's not really fair to point out where they've lied in the past to make your case for lying in the present. I know it's not fair. That's okay. I don't care what anybody thinks about that. It's still my journey. It's still what happened to me. So anyway, then I came down to this studio and had an interview on Raw Mike Richards, and next thing you know, we're doing this show now. And there we go. There was a buzz there that I don't like. Something to do with electricity. How strange. Anyway, Green Crush is, the green is the cannabis, and the crush is what it can do to cancer and other illnesses if used properly, like the tool that it is, instead of run away from, like the tools that tell you it's dangerous. Oh, I just promoted the show and the cause of the show on YouTube, and you're still listening to me? Well, we're getting ready to migrate on over when the hammer comes down. You're not allowed to talk about how healthy it is. You can't be using the truth on some of these channels. No good. So instead, I don't have my facts before me. But if we lose you in the next little week or so, now I noticed the ConQ page didn't get posted last week for some reason. I don't know why that is, but we did post a show, so I guess we'll be posting 2 shows this week. This one and the one we did last week. Anyway, let's get on to the show here. We do have a guest once again. This gentleman hails from, it's hard to say where he hails from, New Jersey, I think, but he's all over the States. He's a mixologist, and you have to be careful how you pronounce that word these days. You don't want to call him something else. That's no good. He's a mixologist and a chef, and he writes. He's got books out. He's also known as the Cocktail Whisperer. His name is Warren Bobrow. He's a freelance mixologist. Isn't that the best kind to be? Specializing in craft spirits. Okay, here we go. He's developed bar programs and implemented their cocktail and ice programs. Warren served as master mixologist for several brands of liquor, including the Busted Barrel rum produced by New Jersey's first licensed distillery since Prohibition. In New Jersey, I guess they mean. He's from New Jersey, Morristown. We'll have to find out if that's a burning question or not. He attended Westmont Montessori School and Gill St. Bernard's School before graduating from Morristown Beard School. I don't know what that means. A beard school? Well, it's the area, right? It must be. I mean, it's not a school where you learn how to become a beard. Then he completed his bachelor's degree in communications and film at Emerson in Boston. 33 years ago, he worked as a dishwasher pot scrubber. So there's something I have in common with him. I've also done that at York Harbor, Maine, and as a television engineer. And then he's now working at he worked for Maine Public Broadcasting in Portland, Maine. Was working at the Portland, Maine PBS station. And he's currently, this is why we have him on, he's currently a cannabis alchemist, presently working on the periphery of known and the unknown universe between craft spirits and the cannabis industry. So this is a guy who is probably 11 times illegal in Canada, the way they have things set up here. He's infusing alcohol with cannabis. We'll find out that he studied at the Johnson and Wales University, taking culinary arts, opened a pasta place in Charleston, South Carolina. They were the first manufacturer of fresh pasta until Hurricane Hugo devastated the place. Returned to school after a 20-year career in private banking. Private banking and washing dishes. Yeah, it's incredible. So I'm just at the one part there. I'm at the I'm at the washing dishes part. I'm not doing the private banking part. Believe me. No such clue. Anyway, Warren is going to be on shortly. He's not new to the trend of cannabis. He says he's been smoking marijuana since he was 13, and he's 57 now, I think, and he's experimented with putting it in food. A banker for 20 years, moved on to becoming a notable person in the cocktail world with 4 books about cocktails. Then in 2012, he read about a cannabis-infused dinner at Roberta's in New York City and noticed that the food had cannabis in it, but no one put anything in the drinks. So that was Warren's mission right there, and he became the Cocktail Whisperer. You can check out cocktailwhisperer.com to find out more about Warren. Let's move on into, well, there's been some more news coming out lately about how terrible cannabis is for the brain. I noticed that those stories are coming out at around the same time of the same similar stories about the brain, but about how good it is. Specifically, the Alzheimer's protein gets apparently severely damaged to the point of non-existence with THC, a dangerous little thing they like to scare you with. So let's move on. Let's move on to medical marijuana can save lives. Here's the evidence. What? Evidence. Yeah. Now this was in the New York Times, and I'm rounding this up from Scoop.it, scoop.it. Jeff Sessions, yeah, he's kind of out of touch, that guy. But anyway, Sessions has it that a discussion of the opioid epidemic needs to, it points to going after marijuana. He's got to get rid of the marijuana, you see, to eliminate the opioid epidemic. Sessions suggesting that addictive pain medication wasn't the only problem and that many heroin addicts start out with marijuana and other drugs. There's a relationship between cannabis and opioids, but Sessions has it backward. Marijuana isn't a gateway drug to opioid addiction. It's a safer alternative to pain meds. Sessions vow to crack down on marijuana will only make the opioid epidemic worse. And we've been finding out lately over time how Sessions, there's so much news going on right now in the States, my goodness, under the Trump administration, but trying to keep it as limited to the purview of the show as possible. Okay, so I know there are other things at hand, but this is a cannabis news and rights show, so we're going to talk more about Sessions right now than Trump, I guess, but why are they doing this? We're always told that the promotion of pharmaceutical drugs is far more reasonable and even-handed, and we just don't even take in the statistics of how dangerous they can be and are. We don't look at that. We don't look at the increase in prescription drug prices going up higher than any other category of health spending. We don't look at that. We think it's nuts when people suspect a pharmaceutical company of gaming the system. Why is that? Why do you figure that it's unreasonable to assume that people who have done horrible things to profit in the past wouldn't do the same thing now? Why is that so odd? And, you know, this is where you fall into the conspiracy category. I mean, you're saying, wait a minute, what you're saying, hang on. What you're saying is this easy to grow, healthful plant can remedy so many of these terrible physical, painful problems that we have for hardly anything, and people can grow that in their own homes? Well, we're going to have to say no to that and throw down a bunch of laws and tell people that it's bad for their brains. Meanwhile, the evidence is now coming in, has been coming in, that THC, the dreaded demon molecule, oh my God, can actually kill the proteins that cause Alzheimer's. Yeah, I've already said that on the show, but where are you hearing it elsewhere? Nowhere. They only talk about the things they want to talk about. Listen to this story from FiercePharma.com this January. Alex Azar's job hop from drug maker Eli Lilly to the Trump administration reflects ever-deepening ties between the pharmaceutical industry and the federal government. We already know this. We saw this with Obama. We've seen it with every president. A Kaiser Health News analysis shows that hundreds of people have glided through the revolving door that connects the drug industry to Capitol Hill and to the Department of Health and Human Services. So what they do is they go in there and they learn everything about government that could possibly get in the way, whether it's health-related, regulatory, any kind of amounts, any kind of tests. And they work to bury those negative results with money. And they call these folks lobbyists. And then the lobbyists come in and tell these clowns, of which there are up to 4 or 5 lobbyists per elected member of Congress. So what's that, like 1,600 people almost? With big wallets telling people, here's how it's going to go from now on. And you don't think people of that mindset can be questioned when they trot out another flu vaccine? Seriously, you're clinging to that position. Oh, yeah, well, they wouldn't, I mean, everything else is screwed up, but they wouldn't do this to us. These people would pump their garbage bilge into the rivers and the streams. And they would get away from it, with it, constantly. Whereas if you were caught throwing one bag of garbage in there, there'd be a ticket in your hands at the very least before you left the dock area. But these folks, they get set up in government. They understand how it works. They change laws that'll make it more favorable for corporations. Then they go back to the corporation and work there again and profit from the laws that they changed. And if you're good at it, you can do it more than 2, 3, 4 times back and forth. Former congressional staffers who now work for drug companies returned to the Hill to lobby former co-workers or employees. The deep ties raise concerns that there should be a fucking investigation, a full-on, 100% dive-down investigation into all of these structural systems that we enslave ourselves underneath of, okay? So we have the drug industry needs an audit, telling us opioids are going to be fine and dandy in 2000 and none of the addiction problems that we now have. If that were cannabis back then and they said that and anybody was near the numbers these people would be in jail right now. But the money's flying around. So that's what they do. They wield undue influence over drug-related legislation and or government policy from one side and then the other, and then back to one and then back to the other. Pharma Guy says, I'd like to say one or two words about what I call the pharma government complex, which is the collusion between the pharmaceutical industry, lawmakers, and government agencies. Now, they're looking for collusion between Russia and electing the Trump government. There may be some there. Some people are running around as though they haven't found anything of that nature. And the people that say they found it don't seem to have much to wave around. But it could be there. But there's definitely collusion between the pharmaceutical industry and the lawmakers who have profited from financial contributions from the industry. It goes on here, as well as help from the industry hired guns, the lobbyists, to craft laws benefiting the drug industry. Obviously, my efforts and the efforts of many others to shine a light on this has achieved nothing. See, they have the collusion. They've got evidence of it. Your child already may be a result of it. So might your diminished income. And yet, nothing happens. And meanwhile, they're chasing collusion and trying to find evidence of collusion for something else. What's going to happen when they get that? Nothing. More means of control. So those hired guns craft laws benefiting the drug industry. And his efforts and the efforts of many others to shine a light on that has achieved nothing. The amount spent on lobbying during the first 9 months of Trump's presidency, reports the Center for Responsive Politics, was higher than in any corresponding period since 2012. The article there was, the D.C. pharma lobbying swamp is bigger and more slimy than ever. So between that and between the opioids being dangerous to the point of people dying, and even more dangerous to the point of people denying that cannabis can end that situation, they choose to kvetch and moan about, what about the children? And the children are not even using the smoking as much as they used to. Young people choosing marijuana over an alcohol and cigarettes, but they're less interested in smoking it. Taking it in different ways, vaping it, eating it, infusing it. And yet these folks come up with these studies. Here's one from June 4th. New research investigating the effects of heavy cannabis use on cognitive functioning in adolescents and young adults has found little to no long-term harm. Yet we tolerate and accept without question the notion that cannabis should not be consumed by anybody under 25, absent any questioning why we feel it's okay to send military-trained 18-year-olds off to face mayhem and death. Or that teenage brains are the most malleable and regenerative. But by all means, make up your crazy laws. Medical pot legalization results in an average of a 10% reduction in traffic fatalities. Wow. This was published in the Journal of Law and Economics in 2013. To date, 16 states at that point had passed medical marijuana laws, yet very little is known about their effects, so they say. Using state-level data, we examine the relationship between medical marijuana laws and a variety of outcomes. Legalization of medical marijuana is associated with increased use of marijuana among adults, but not among minors. In addition, legalization is associated with a nearly 9% decrease in traffic fatalities, most likely due to its impact on alcohol consumption. Our estimates provide strong evidence that marijuana and alcohol are substitutes. Amazing. This from December 20th, 2016. States with marijuana laws have fewer traffic fatalities. You'd think it would be higher. But researchers at Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health found an 11% reduction in traffic fatalities on average when examining places that have enacted medical marijuana laws. The presence of medical marijuana dispensaries also correlated with fewer traffic fatalities. And what do we got here? Cops going to try to arrest you for it. Meanwhile, how about this just before we get to our illustrious guest? This is in National Institute of Health.gov. Assessment of cannabinoids, agonist and antagonist in invasion potential of K562 cancer cells. It's a kind of cancer. The prominent hallmark, this is the background of malignancies. This is a I should be able to say this pretty well. Metastatic spread of cancer cells. Recent studies have reported the nature of invasive cells could be changed after this phenomenon, causing chemotherapy resistance. It's been demonstrated that the upregulated expression of matrix metalloproteinase as a metastasis biomarker can fortify the metastatic potential of leukemia. I'll get to the conclusion in a second here. Furthermore, investigations have confirmed the inhibitory effect of cannabinoid and endocannabinoid on the proliferation of cancer cells, in vivo and in vitro. Conclusion. Our findings clarifies that CB1 receptors, also known as cannabinoid receptors in the body, system number 1, in your body that you already got when you were born, which already makes small amounts of DMT. This body, it's responsible for the anti-invasive effects in the K562 cell lines. So there's another piece of science there telling you that cancer and cannabis are not very good friends. So let's do to one killing the other. All right, so let me get our guest on the phone. Here's Warren. Let me give him a call here. And we will get Warren on the phone.
Hello.
Warren Bobrow, how are you today?
I am fantastic.
Fantastic.
I just muted my computer so there won't be any echo.
Okay. Thank you for doing that. How are you today? Where are you today? Are you you were bobbing around all over the place.
Well, that's what I like to be doing. I'm sitting at my desk.
Okay, well, it seems like you got a handle on that.
Morristown, New Jersey.
Okay. Morristown. That's where you were born. You're a hometown boy, are you?
I'm a hometown boy, and no one knows me here. It's remarkable.
That's good. Okay, well, let's find out why no one knows you there. It's a good place to kind of hide out, I guess, right?
Yeah, because they know me every place else.
You leave your celebrity behind for a little bit. So Warren, when we spoke on the phone the other day, you said something rather interesting to me, and we'll tell the folks who you are. I've already announced you as the cocktail whisperer, author of many books, and mixologist, which I was very careful to pronounce correctly.
You did okay.
You need to do mixologist. You are a mixologist, and nothing else that starts with an M and ends with an ist. So you were a drinker, so to speak. Now you and I, this is interesting here because you and I come at this from a different angle, because I don't all that often participate in for cancer related reasons. I stopped what I would call my usual intake of alcohol some time ago, but I'm very fascinated in what you're getting to. But before we get into some of the cool questions, like I really am interested in, there's a lot of, people that have a problem mixing the two elements, etc., particularly when you're driving. Yeah. Of course, that's the case. But since you're an expert, let's hear all about it. But I blame all this on Montessori. I blame it all on Montessori.
Oh, it was the open classroom. I know, and maybe if I had a little more direction in my life from an early age. I grew up on a farm, and I was very sheltered, and things probably could have been a lot harder on me. But it was an upbringing like no one else's that I've ever come across. And my dad was an international tax lawyer, and my mom took care of her horses, and and I took care of scooping the stuff that horses make.
Oh,
lots of that. So I mean, we traveled extensively growing up, and I guess the first time I really was introduced to cannabis was probably from my uncle, who was a hippie.
He was a what, sorry?
He graduated from. He was a hippie. He graduated from college in 1969, so that put him right in there with all those darn hippies.
Right.
So that's where I smoked weed for the first time.
With your grandfather?
No, not my uncle. My
your
uncle, not
uncle.
my grandfather.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, my uncle. My grandfather was very my grandfather was very conservative. He wouldn't have had that conversation.
Fair enough. So you didn't do this with your dad though? Was it your dad's brother or your mom's?
My mom's brother. My father never had a brother. He only had a sister, and he was very difficult. My father was very difficult.
Oh, okay.
He did not approve of me using cannabis, and he disowned me for it.
So. Oh wow.
Yeah.
Oh gee whiz. Sorry about that.
Yeah. So I'm actually that's part of the magic of being an author is no matter what someone does to you, you can make them live in infamy by dedicating books to them. And so I dedicated Cannabis Cocktails to him. I said to my father, Robert Bobrow, who taught me to stand on my own 2 feet and succeed at what made me happy.
Oh,
right. So, that's how you take a bad situation and you turn it into something that you take the power away from a dead person.
Right.
And, so I've done that, and I've been able to look back at that and say I made the right decision by dedicating the book to him, because he was unable to see that I really had healing in mind. I wasn't looking for a recreational book, and I certainly wasn't looking for a get high quick book. So I think that's really important to make that differentiation.
And he never got the chance to see your book, I guess?
No. The last 2 or 3 months of his life were in the complete knowledge that I would never talk to him again.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate. But anyway, so we all, that's a great example. I've heard this before that, every person in that category is someone you look up to or supposed to look up to will teach you by example somehow or other. And it's not always
and it's not always the lesson that you want to learn.
Right.
It's a lesson that it's more difficult. And I he knew who I was from an early age, and he certainly knew that I smoked marijuana and or cannabis or whatever you want to call it. And that wasn't going to change. That certainly wasn't going to change, and it was something that I've done for so long that. And probably my stability in life, I believe, is because I use cannabis products, and it's made me a calmer, more peaceful person. And that's just who I am as a man. And, you get to be a certain age and you say, yeah, I know I look 41, but I'm really 57 years old and I've had a lot of experiences, not all of them good. And, but they brought me here. And hopefully, the book Cannabis Cocktails was meant as a method of healing. And my methods really are not so new. They really go back to the mid 1800s when, there wasn't great refrigeration and certainly there wasn't electricity to keep things cool. So alcohol and cannabis certainly were used as a tincture. And, who knows what your apothecarian was doing with it. But I think he was probably making very basic cocktails and using cannabis. And we know this is true because I visited the Apothecary Museum down in New Orleans when they were doing a presentation on cannabis in the early apothecary, and they had done all the research. So my job was easy. I knew that they were infusing THC and not hemp, but THC into craft spirits. I took it to the next step and wrote a book about it.
And when was that you discovered this?
I'd say it was about 2015. They did a presentation at the apothecary at the old pharmacy museum in New Orleans.
Okay. All right. Now, let me ask you a couple of questions because I'm coming at it from a person that I don't really know much about alcohol. So any question I have will be genuine curiosity and or ignorance as opposed to trying to trip you up. Alcohol, as I've known it, is technically speaking, it's a depressant. No?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
So that doesn't mean that you're going to be all bummed out or whatever if you use it properly, right?
No,
Once again,
no,
it's a tool.
It's just it's I always say everything in moderation, and I know, originally when I wrote the book, we kind of went hog wild on some of the potencies of the craft cocktails, and I must admit that they were. I really had very little idea how strong the drinks were, and they were extraordinarily strong. But we've really ratcheted back the amount of cannabis that's in the drinks, and it's more of a microdose now instead of an overdose.
Oh,
so
what was the overdose? What was the overdose that was too high?
The overdose was from the cannabis. Certainly wasn't from the alcohol,
Sure.
because I wasn't putting very much alcohol in. But it was this crossfade that not everyone is accustomed to, and it can be an overwhelming experience. But in that case, we recommend lemon juice and peppercorns together. The terpenes in the lemon juice and the peppercorns counteract those terpenes in the cannabis, and it's just almost instantaneous. You come off of this stuff, and no more pesky hospital trips or throwing up in front of friends and family. That should never happen.
So what kind of dosages were we getting that kind of reaction from?
Well, since I tested all the recipes on myself, I was doing like 150 milligram cocktails, and those are just way out of line.
Yeah.
And I have an incredibly high tolerance, but I still feel that if someone was doing, looking at the book recreationally, they could be in trouble. From a medicinal standpoint, probably not. I have glaucoma, and I'm looking to reduce the intraocular pressure behind my eyes. And I don't want to take eye drops, and I want to just, sometimes I want to mix, infuse THC into mezcal and make something, with Pickett's ginger beer, or, something really exciting in that realm. And I live in a part of New Jersey that's incredibly conservative, and the smell of cannabis in the air is guaranteed to get you arrested, even if you have a cannabis card like I do. It's at least going to get the attention of the local police. I don't want that. I was in LA over the weekend. I flew out to look at Bloom, which is they make beautiful, just, world-class cannabis oil in 510 cartridges and all sorts of things. And, when you walk around the streets in LA smoking a joint, no one pays any attention. They're looking for real crime. They're not looking for someone smoking weed in the street. So around here in New Jersey, it's just the opposite. And if a policeman was to walk past you or drive past you and they smelled it, you're looking for some serious trouble, and certainly you'll be entered into the system. And I don't need that. So that's why when I think about being the person that I am and who I've become, certainly in the legal or illegal standpoint, I want to just put it right out there. I don't want anyone really to know my business. So that's why I wrote the book. And the other reason why I wrote the book was during Giuliani's administration, I was picked up for smoking a joint in New York City, and I never want to go through that again. And that was that should have never happened to anyone. And they took me out of commission for 48 hours without charges, without a phone call, without anything.
Wow.
And they held me in Rikers.
Because you were literally...
And that was no fair.
You were
no fair. Literally smoking... I had just been up in Vancouver, and I brought some BC Bud back with me. Everyone slipped a joint into their jacket, and I did too. And I lit it up in the street, and they said they smelled it 2 blocks away. That had that green crack smell.
Right.
Really, really, really intense. And so it seemed like 20 policemen came down on me, and I had probably as much weed is what would fit on my fingernail, and I have tiny hands. So,
wow.
It was really, really, really bad. And, what was I going to do? Say, please don't arrest me, officer. But what are they going to do? They had to do it. So they did it. Wow. And that's why I wrote the book. I wrote the book because I want people to be able to take their medicine, not have anyone know what they're doing.
Oh, that's amazing. That's fantastic. What a great way to get going. So, but first of all, you became, I lost the plot here. You were dishwashing and then you were a banker?
Yeah, I was dishwashing. No, I was dishwashing. Then I became a chef. Then I went to culinary school. Then I did the ACF apprenticeship. Then I opened a fresh pasta company. I cooked around the United States. I lost my business. I cooked around the United States. it was not sustainable. I mean, physically not sustainable. It was a tough time. You know, it was like the early 1990s, and food had not exploded yet like it had today.
Right.
So I was working in a business, not being able to afford to live in New York City. Certainly, I was working in a restaurant in New York City, and it was just not sustainable at all. So I was helping my dad out in his law office, which was doomed. For, you know, I wasn't going to become a lawyer, and he suggested, since I owed him $75,000 for losing it in my pasta company, he suggested me getting a real job. And for 20 years, I paid it. You know, it took me 20 years to pay it off. And the day that I was able to pay it off, I was the last day I worked in the corporate world.
Wow, amazing. So it's not.
I started at the bottom and I worked my way up. You know,
yeah,
that's what I did. That's what I've always done.
And then when you were learning about, you know, I mean, okay, put it this way. When I was saying to you that I don't know much about alcohol, so there are a lot of different drinks. There's your rusty nails and your tequilas. Sure. There's your various lineups of shots, sex on the beach, all that kind of thing.
I'm not. No. I don't do drinks like that. Mine are unique. I am a mixologist. I create my own craft cocktails using craft spirits. You're never going to see. I mean, very, very rarely do I have anything that's even moderately sweet. My drinks are savories. They're definitely complex, but they're not complicated. And I think it's really, really important to differentiate between those, you know, B-52s that we used to do shooters of, or you know, Long Island iced teas. No, I don't do things like that. Mine are incredibly sophisticated.
But that's what I mean,
the
though.
Finest spirits that money can buy. I mean, but really, I mean, at the end of the day, you know, what you were discussing was the kind of the seedy underbelly of the mixology business, but I'm really at the top of the house. And not just me saying this. I would never have 6 books in print if it wasn't for the fact that my stuff is really unique, you know?
Right. Well, the reason I'm asking isn't that I was inferring that you were doing that. I was just saying that is generally the scope of those kinds of drinks that we all get into. We do those shooters at the bars. We chase down with tequilas.
Maybe, but no. I want to say, you know, I'm involved with another whole group, and you know, that high volume, you know, bad ingredients. Yeah, I know that goes on, but I've never worked in that. I've only worked in the white tablecloth, handcrafted, and the book doesn't have anything, you know, any like big names in it. It's all small producer, you know, craft spirits. And I find it very important, if you're going to use any sort of heating techniques, you're not going to want to have anything that's caramel colored or added sugar or glycerin added, because it's really going to change the chemical makeup of the alcohol, and someone could get sick, and I don't want that. Yeah. So I use, you know, craft spirits that haven't been manipulated, and that's so important, that they're not, you know, attacked by methods that are unclean. And you know, I'm never going to have this as something legal, because I am changing the recipes of the spirits, and of course the organization that monitors that in the United States, called the TTB, I'm sure they frown upon that. But you know, I'm not doing it in bars, and I do it for private events occasionally. You might read about it afterwards, certainly never before. We try to vet our guest list thoroughly. I don't want any trouble. This is not something that we take lightly. I feel very honored to be in the place of healing. It kind of goes back to things that I knew from my own family. You know, they were in the quote unquote snake oil business. So I want to be very careful and very cognizant of not doing that, not having that stigma.
So, but
because I really believe the cannabis heals. I mean, I truly believe the cannabis heals, and that's where I'm at.
So when you have a certain kind of drink, I mean, what I mean is you turn the whole thing on its ear. You came across all those sweeter drinks and those kind of ritualized
of course
drinks, and you went, no, hang on.
But I was never working with them, and my first 3 cocktail books, apothecary cocktails, whiskey cocktails, and bitters and shrub syrup cocktails, those were not sweet cocktail books, and I'd be very hard pressed to find anything in there that was sweet. The only time I did anything that was remotely sweet was in cannabis cocktails, but I love working with chocolate, so I was able to do bittersweet chocolate as opposed to, sugary sweet chocolate. I think there's one drink, about, let's see if I can find the book. I don't have it here. Where's my book? It's someplace around my office. Oh, there it is. But there's some drinks in it that could be perceived as sweet, but I really don't believe that they are. Here, No One Can Talk to a Horse, of course. It has chocolate syrup, cannabis-infused whiskey, chocolate liqueur, whipped cream, and bittersweet chocolate shavings and ice.
Oh,
so it really is it's a bourbon chocolate. It's bittersweet chocolate. It has fresh whipped cream, really good quality chocolate syrup, only 2 ounces of it. So it's not an awful vodka-based concoction. It's a bourbon dream. It's really sophisticated.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
So.
That sounds really good. So
Yeah,
you get to play, right? You get to play with different combos.
Yeah, absolutely. But of course. I mean, the one that you were saying you don't drink. I would recommend the cannabis-infused condensed milk with Vietnamese iced coffee. We all love Vietnamese iced coffee. It's so slippery, and the chicory is kind of bitter, and the coffee is very, very strong espresso, and then you cut it with this unctuous, sweet, but not too sweet, condensed milk that's been simmered with decarbed cannabis. And I've been decarbing my cannabis in a device called the Ardent Lift. And what that does is it brings the cannabis to 100% bioavailability. So it makes me look like a star every single time because, I'm not burning up my batches in the toaster oven anymore like everyone used to do all the time. Or, if you're using a rice cooker, sometimes they get off temperature and then the thing is boiling and all your THC is evaporated.
Oh,
so,
wow, nice.
There's a lot of little techniques that we do. And in the book, of course, I teach you how to do it the old fashioned slow way using an oven and a closed container. But, when I'm out in the field and doing, events, I want to make sure that it works perfectly every time. So I use the Ardent Lift and I use the Magical Butter Machine. Just 2 pieces of machinery that make me look like a pro every single time. And of course, when someone's paying you, a pretty penny to do an event, you want to make sure that everyone gets stoned. So there's just no messing around,
Wow, that's great. I'm just looking at that now. The Ardent Herbal Lift.
Yes, the Ardent Lift. Yes,
Yeah.
I love that thing. And I spoke about them at South by Southwest this year. Disruptive technology in your home cannabis kitchen.
That just makes it great for everyone, I mean, I used to decarb, and it was difficult, I mean, you had to make sure that you didn't go too hot for too long.
You're burning up batches.
Yeah.
You're burning up batches, and then some, if you're looking to get more CBD or CBGD or whatever they are, I'm not a doctor, but I will say that some of them are revealed at higher temperatures. Some of the feelings are revealed at lower temperatures. Then, of course, there's all those important terpenes.
Right.
The Bloom product that I visited this weekend, they preserve these incredible terpenes. It's like thrusting your face into a bowl of fruit. It's just incredible. I mean, I'd never smelled anything like it. I thought that they did something artificial, and then I learned it was all natural, and it was like, wow.
Even better.
So, yeah. Even better. And, I'm the lucky guy. I truly am the lucky guy because I must say, I was a banker. I hated my life. Every day was a drag. I didn't know what I was going to be when I grew up. I was only trying to please my father and grandfather who hated me anyway. And they put their money where their mouth was and cut me off forever. So I had to become something that was good and follow my dreams and be something that was different. And that's what I think I've achieved. And, no one said I was going to be rich and famous. I'd be happy with just famous. Rich, money comes and goes. But just being recognized for my craft and being the person that wrote the first book about mixing cannabis and cocktails, that's all I ever wanted. I don't want anything else.
Yeah, we were thinking of you a while ago. We knew you were coming on the show, and an article came out in the Canadian publications saying that some Canadian company is going to infuse an alcoholic beverage with cannabis.
Yeah, Constellation.
Won't this be exciting as the first time it's ever happened? I mean, that's what was in the article.
Yeah, no, it's not the first time it's ever happened.
Sure,
I contacted them and I said, I really am the first person to do it on a commercial scale. I know bartenders have been playing around with it, and I'm happy that they have. but I've been able to standardize the recipe, and actually I've taken it even further than the standard recipe. I mean, the book was great, and I'm happy that I wrote it, but I'm doing stuff that is just so far beyond what was in the book. With nitrous oxide now, people are using CO2 in the marketplace, and I'm saying, no, all you need is this issy, which is the thing that makes whipped cream. And once you take your decarbed cannabis and you put it in the issy with whatever craft spirit you have, hit it with 2 jolts of nitrous oxide, and then I activate the THC with just in the magical butter machine, 160 degrees for about 2 hours, and you have the finest craft spirits that money can buy, completely packed full of THC, and it's everyone's going to get off.
Wow.
So all I can say is maybe I didn't invent the science, but I've made the science better.
Yeah, it's well suited to your skill set.
Well, yeah, and my skill set is as a mixologist, and I have to be straight out about that. And I'm not a big drinker anymore, and a lot of it has to do with health. I mean, really, there's all sorts of it's not a safe and sane material for me to be working with. So I decided to follow my dreams, do what I love, listen to my heart, and go forward. And that's what I'm doing.
Yeah. Hey, so this is a bit of a drag to bring up, but we just lost Anthony Bourdain. You did an interview with him regarding Scotch. 4 questions about Scotch on wildriverreview.com. Tell us about what it was like talking with him. I mean, he's a very, very interesting guy, and I felt that he was, well, let's see how I can put this in a way that seems reasonable. I felt that he was uncomfortable in the suit. That's what I felt he was. And when I put my arm around him for the photograph that I had with him, I felt that he wasn't having a good day. That's what it felt like. His energy was, get me the hell out of here. I don't want to be here. It was a luncheon for the American Crafts Council at Bernardine in New York City. And I was given the opportunity of asking him. I really wanted to ask him 5 questions, and it worked out to be 4 questions. Then the PR came down on me, and they said, no, it has to be 3. And I said, no, let's have 4. But anyway, he was not comfortable having any conversation other than Balvenie, which was sponsoring him. Right.
So I really couldn't get to who he was. But for a split second, he fell in love with my gnome, and I don't know, how to explain that. I carry a 1860s German drinking gnome, and I was holding him the gnome in my hands, and he looked over at Klaus, that's the name of my gnome, and he smiled, and it was almost like quizzical. He was interested in knowing why I was carrying a gnome, but there wasn't enough time for him to ask that question, and I had to kind of extract the information from him very quickly,
right,
and be crisp, and then let him go on to the next person. But for a split second, and I have the picture on, in the piece, it shows him and myself, and he looks kind of sheepish in the picture.
Yeah.
And my gnome, and it was sad, and it's a tough business, and there's a lot of mental issues in the business. And when I started as a dishwasher working, I worked with a lot of people who were like PhDs and, people who were like professors in school, and they just couldn't handle it. And they dropped out of society, and they became cooks, or they became dishwashers, or they became, like I did, a pot scrubber. And it's tough, things are not always what they seem. And I always found, for me, it was, I had a tough time of it. I may have grown up in a very privileged way, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I have that now. And I work very hard for what I have, and I'm completely self-made. And it's really it's an honor to say that, but it's also damn frightening.
Yeah.
So, it really is, because I have no one to fall back on but myself. And it's not always easy to be myself, especially working in an industry such as cannabis, which has such a stigma, especially on the East Coast of the United States. The West Coast, I think they've solved that stigma a long time ago, and certainly Canada, where you're in Canada, right?
Yeah. What about up and down the middle?
How's
How's
it? In the middle, it's a good way of getting arrested. I'm just serious. It's I travel all over, and I don't want to tell you how I get things. I've never have any trouble finding anything. That's probably my benefit of who I am. But I will say at the end of the day that there are places that I can go and places that I can't go, and I have to be careful. And when I first started going down to New Orleans, it was still illegal. Now it's legal down there. New York City, of course, I have that problem with New York City, so I'm happy that they're not arresting people for pot in New York City anymore.
Yeah.
New Jersey, they still are arresting people in New Jersey, so whatever that means, it just means. And I just go forward, and hopefully that I can be the person in life that I want to be, and I'm able to be successful at it. And if not, I've got to figure out what to do because I'm not a youngster anymore.
Right. Well, you're.
But I think this is a good path. I really think this is a good path.
Yeah.
I'm confident it is. I'm really, really confident in myself.
So these books that you've written that are cookbooks now, or not cookbooks, but they're recipe books, right?
They're cocktail cookbooks, yeah.
Yeah.
Recipe books, certainly, and there's stories and conversations, and it's just a really interesting way of looking at cocktail mixology.
So we're going to need a magical butter.
I'm pretty talented,
Well, of course you are. Of course you are. And what's amazing is there's not 100,000 guys like you. There's a very few people.
No one would put up with the kind of BS that I put up with for so many years. So they would say, "Get me the hell out of here."
Yeah. So I mean, it
but
goes.
I really had no other choice. What can I do?
The reviews on some of your books on Amazon are great. It said, "Got it from my sister that's a bartender. She loves it and makes me some good damn drinks out of it."
Yep.
What an awesome book filled with great ideas, methods, and insight. I've made a few of these recipes, and they're easy to follow and quite effective. Great recipes in a fun format. Enjoyed the book very much and recommend it to home bartenders looking to expand their repertoire. All kinds of great, very easy to understand. Here's what I hate about cookbooks. So I've got to see one of yours, got to get one. Here's what I don't like about it. There'll be, like in a food cookbook, it'll be like, the delicious stew sauce or whatever. So you go, okay, the delicious stew. So you start reading through, and it says you need a pound of meat and an onion and this and that and the other. And then it'll say, then you need some fantastic super sauce. For fantastic super sauce recipe, turn to page 41. Oh, okay. So
it's not there.
Then you got to turn page 41. There's all the sauce, and you have another series of things that you have to get through, and it says, "Oh, for this involves the infused coconut meat. So for that, turn to page 83." And you can never get done.
Yeah,
you can never get done. You can't have all the staples.
My drinks are pretty easy. I mean, the first couple books were a little more difficult, but I will honestly say that I learned my lesson. So I wanted to just be really clear in the sense that I wanted it to be approachable. I wanted it to be things that people could do, and really, at the end of the day, make it something that's fun and make it something that's healing. That's so important. And really, there's the other part of it is that you can really, really, really get stoned on it. I have to say, it really is a wonderful feeling, and I don't mean to say this in an irresponsible manner.
No,
but there are
not.
great feelings. There are great feelings in life, and this is one of them. And I really, really am confident that that in the right dose, there's nothing that feels better. There is nothing that I have found that feels better, and that's just more approachable and just friendly.
So what's one of your favorite drinks then? What say if I like the gin and tonic, what would you recommend?
If you like a gin and tonic, well, it's kind of difficult for me to cut it down that simply. I have one drink in there that it's a drink with rum agricole, a little bit of lime juice. I'm on my Bluetooth now. It's lime juice, rum agricole, and a touch of simple syrup. And it's just delicious.
Okay. Wow. That sounds good.
It's absolutely delicious. It's so simple. It's a drink that's from the island of Martinique, and it's called a tea punch, or a Tipunch, or tea punch. And it's just so refreshing, and you can drink it with ice or without ice, and it's a fun drink to drink. And 2 ingredients, really 3 in a pinch, and anyone can do it.
What's that
and
simple
really
sauce
the only
again?
thing the simple syrup is the part the simple syrup is the part that's infused with the THC.
Oh, okay. I see. Oh, that's
so it's very, very easy to produce. And you would take the cannabis that's been decarbed, and you add it to your simple syrup, which is 1 cup of sugar to 1 cup of water, and then you let it simmer until it gets just down to you let it simmer so it gets nice and thick, and then it goes from there.
Wow.
And it's easy to use in your craft cocktails, and you can use it in all sorts of things. You can use it in a Manhattan. You can use it in a Rob Roy. You can infuse just about anything you want.
Okay, so what?
It's very, very easy, and
Give us a rundown then on some of the things we'll need. You said you had a magical butter machine. You've got this decarboxylate unit that's quite amazing, right?
Hope I didn't lose you.
No, I'm still here. Sounds like you think you lost me, but maybe... no, I can hear you. I can still hear you.
Hello?
I can still hear you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I hit a dead spot.
That's okay. No, I'm just asking. Yeah, what do you need in the way of having a bag of tricks? Like, you've got a magical butter machine, right? That's a particular unit that makes butter, and you also need this decarboxylating unit.
Yes, you have to decarb first. That's so important. That's essential. I can't imagine doing my process without decarbing, because you're not going to get the full potential of your cannabis.
Right. So you need that
important.
So you need to get that thing set up. You
Yeah.
need to get one of those.
Yeah, but not that you don't necessarily have to buy this nearly $250 item. You can do it in the oven as long as you have a commercial, what should we call it, thermometer, so you know that you have a nice even temperature.
Right.
You don't want to open up the oven while it's decarbing to check the temperature. You can look through the glass to see it.
Okay.
Because when you open up the toaster oven, it's going to drop, or the regular oven, it's going to drop 30 degrees, and that'll ruin your batch. So you just to be cognizant, you're not going to go out for a pizza while you're decarbing and say, "Oh, I forgot the weed."
Right.
That's really important. Because I don't know where you are if it's expensive. Down here in the medical system, you can't afford to make mistakes.
No, you don't want to make mistakes.
I have to have science. Yeah, I have to have science that works every single time.
Right.
And that's my pleasure to do that. And I want to make it easy. And I want to make it approachable, and I want to make it delicious.
Right. That's the selling point, right? I mean, you're talking to people, how do you actually get going? Like, what's an event for you? How does Warren spend the night being a mixologist somewhere? What's involved with that?
Oh my gosh! Well, I create a cocktail menu, of course, and I usually like pairing cocktails to different courses of food, in the meal. Sometimes we'll have like a welcome punch, and the welcome punch will have some cannabis in it. Then we would go into maybe a whiskey or a mezcal drink to go with an appetizer.
Right.
A little more assertive. Maybe for an entree, we could do it in like an infused milk punch. It would go really nicely. And of course the milk is infused with THC. Dessert would be maybe an amaro, which is an Italian digestif, and then we could have infused that as well, and then maybe finish it off with a Turkish coffee with a dollop of cannabis butter on top. Like a bulletproof coffee.
Wow, nice. Wow. Have you done that? Have you mixed the meat?
Yeah. All those things. I've done all these things. I just did one very recently, and it had I did a honey. It was a gin from Vermont called Bar Hill, and it's defined by the reason that it's made with raw honey and grain. And I found when you add THC to it, you can make things like bee's knees, which is the honey and lemon and THC, and it's just a beautiful little cocktail. You know,
Wow.
simple, simple, simple.
Nice to keep it simple, right? What's the most
Well, I want to make it
ridiculous?
so well, the most ridiculous thing is probably like the mango lassies, because they're just a little more difficult to make. You know, they've got a little bit of Greek yogurt in them, and they have a mango, you know, whatchamacallit, puree, and then you have to infuse the Greek yogurt or rum or whatever with THC, and then, you know, there are different steps for making a mango lassi.
Right.
But they are so delicious
They're
because
gonna be,
they're
yeah,
so
yeah.
refreshing. You know, it's like today, right now it's 90 degrees outside, and I wish I had one in my hand because it would be stoning and relaxing and fun and just all the things that we want to have in a craft cocktail that just happens to be packed with enough THC to drop an entire family of elephants.
And tell us also, you're also well aware that when you mix cannabis and mangoes, right, you get an extra...
Right, it enhances the effect.
Yeah.
It makes the effect more intense. And that's probably, and I also do a rose and cardamom loss, but it doesn't have the mango loss intensity. No.
So mango's the only kind of fruit or substance that we know that can do this outside of the cannabis realm. That will
I
actually...
don't. I think rhubarb. I think rhubarb does it too, but it has a different effect.
Rhubarb.
Rhubarb works for certain deficiencies in the male toolbox.
Right. Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I understand. I had a lovely rhubarb patch, and you're making me wistful for rhhubarb right now, and a whole series of thought patterns that are coming out of it. So, hey, listen. Before we get too far into this, I mean, we're gonna start to wrap it up soon, but I want to make sure you get out your particulars. Tell us some of the names of your books and where can people find you. Do you tweet? Do you have a Twitter handle?
Sure. They can get me on Twitter at my name, Warren Bobrow, with a number 1 because someone stole my name, so I had to put a 1 in front of it.
Oh.
Long story. I'm on LinkedIn under my own name. I think Facebook is Bobrow. Instagram, of course, just my name, how it should be, Warren Bobrow. I have 5 or 6 books. Let's see. I have Apothecary Cocktails that came out 2013. Whiskey cocktails, bitters and shrub syrup cocktails, cannabis cocktails. My 5th book came out May of 2017, the Craft Cocktail Compendium, and I have a 6th cookbook in France, Apothecary Cocktails translated into French. And I believe there's another one that Barnes & Noble requisitioned. It's a remake of whiskey cocktails.
Oh yeah.
And it's just for Barnes & Noble.
Okay, that's in reprint. Yeah, that's neat. So that's amazing. You've got all these books. This is so you're basically writing a book a year at this point.
Yeah, and one of them two books in the first year. I did whiskey cocktails and bitters and shrub in 1 year. I'll never do that again. That was absolutely crazy. Those books are 160,000 words apiece, and I wrote them in 1 month. I was only given a month.
Wow.
So that's something you should know. You know, publishing is not a glamorous art. No one gets rich in publishing. I wish that my publisher had told me more clearly. Maybe she did, maybe she didn't. But the fact is, no one gets rich in being being an author. What it leads to are great things, and I certainly had the personality for it to become something that was more than just writing books.
Yeah.
You know, it took me to the next step in my life. And the Cannabis Cocktails book has made me a star. I mean, I never saw it coming. I'm famous in certainly in craft cocktails, but I never thought I'd be famous in cannabis. And I'm just thrilled to be famous in cannabis because it helps me be the more authentic Warren. You know, in liquor, I was always stumbling with it because I don't like getting drunk. But in weed, you know, I can smoke just about anyone under the table without much trouble.
Right.
And it's fun for me.
Sounds like fun.
It's not stressful, and there are no hangovers, and there's none of the downtime that I had with liquor, and I go down to events like Tales of the Cocktail in New Orleans, and my wife would be pained to hear this, but it's always true. You 1 drink or 5 drinks, all it takes is one to go over the edge. And that means 1 or 2 days sitting in bed throwing up in New Orleans because it's so humid.
Sure.
It's so hot and humid. You don't want to have any alcohol in you. It's bad. So I'm really careful about it now. And I don't want those experiences. They take away too much time that I don't have.
So you don't drink any alcohol now at all? Or,
hardly. I mean, I love wine. I still write about wine, and I love wine. I very rarely work at beer, but I absolutely adore beer, but I don't drink as much of it as I would like to because, of course, it's liquid bread, and it all goes to my belly.
Right.
I very rarely drink hard spirits. I can tell you how many drinks I've had since last year's Tales of the Cocktail on both hands, maybe 8 in the last year.
Okay.
That's it. I just don't have a palate for it anymore. I do tasting notes for barrel whiskey, and that I'm able to do, but I don't necessarily find myself going out to a bar to have drinks with friends. I'm just not comfortable doing that, and it doesn't do anything for me.
But
all
you
that
can
I
do
really
it though.
Want to do.
You can do it as a mixologist, though. You can throw down anything.
Well, yeah,
right?
I mean, but I don't have to drink to be a mixologist.
No, of course not. Yeah.
I know what the things taste like, and then the other side of it is I'm trained as a saucier, so I know flavor. Flavor comes easily to me.
What's that? You're trained as a what? A voisier?
Saucier, soup stocks and sauces.
Right.
A saucier.
A saucier. Oh, okay.
I went.
Sure.
I did the culinary school, and I worked in France, and I know about flavor. So
nice.
I want to just be, as I said, I want to be very crisp, and knowing that I have a trained palate.
Yeah.
And my palate was nurtured and educated growing up on a farm that's organic and biodynamic. And as I said earlier in the interview, I had a very privileged upbringing, and the food was the best food the money can buy. And whenever we traveled to Europe, we were not eating in hotel rooms.
Yeah.
So, we would go 3 or 4 or 5 times a year, and it was always the very best. So I have to just be very, very strict and say that I didn't grow up eating fast food, and I don't drink, eat it today, and I don't drink regular, soda or anything like that.
Right.
And I'm really just careful and cognizant of my life, and I try to, be peaceful and live a life of wellness. And my drinks, certainly are strong, but I will say that they have a positive bend to them as well.
Yeah. Well, I was born on a farm too. So, it was a wind farm, though. I got in trouble all the time because
farm.
Yeah, when my mom called me, I couldn't hear her because the frequency would get absorbed by the blades. That's another story. Anyway, she, I have to spend a little bit of time just before we get going on. I want to get your thoughts. I understand where you're at. I really do understand where you're at, where your palate is, and where your mind is regarding alcohol. I think it's fascinating that it seems to me that you were right in there and you've kind of migrated across the divide, spent some time in 50-50 land, and now you're far more into the infused cannabis version of things than the alcohol version of things. Is that fair to say?
That's absolutely so. And I'm proud to be that person and to be able to harness that energy, because, as I said, my contribution to the alcohol world through using cannabis is not so far off the mark historically.
Yeah.
So all that I can say is that I tried to take ideas that were from another century and reinvent them using modern techniques and modern ingredients.
Wow. Well, that's incredible. So now this sets up my final question for you so very well. I just kind of want to save the moment. But regarding everything you just said, what are your thoughts and what kind of things have you spent time thinking about regarding absinthe? This is another mind-altering substance that is an
God.
alcoholic
No,
beverage.
it's not. It's not mind-altering at all. There's
What is it?
nothing in absinthe which is mind-altering. Altering. There's more of the thujone, which is perceived as mind-altering in onions and orange juice than there is in absinthe.
Wow.
So that's completely off mark. It's totally off mark. Absinthe is literally innocuous. The only thing in absinthe that I really worry about is the high alcohol, but I don't worry about anything else.
Could be 148
in
proof.
it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't matter at all. Wormwood is innocuous, and thujone is innocuous, and I get really worked up about that because it's a bad boy, certainly, but it's not bad boy because of the herbs. It's bad boy because of the alcohol, and that's why. There's nothing in absinthe that's going to hurt you in any way. As I said, the active ingredient, quote unquote, in absinthe is something called thujone, and there's more of it in an onion and more of it in orange juice. And your Thanksgiving turkey has more than absinthe. It was invented. The poisonous aspect was invented by the French Wine Council because absinthe drinking was cutting into the wine sales.
Oh.
So they had to vilify it.
What did you say the name of the substance was in there?
I've seen this in France, so I know.
What did you say the main substance that's more in onions is?
It's called thujone. It's thujone.
Oh.
Thujone.
Wow. Huh. Okay.
And that's derived from wormwood.
Right.
And
wow.
wormwood is in, like Angostura bitters has a ton of wormwood in it. And gin, wormwood sometimes is one of the botanicals in gin, and it just goes on and on. All the different things that wormwood is in that you wouldn't even know it, and you wouldn't even, you'd be like, oh, wormwood, hey, that's great, wormwood.
Yeah.
Well, wormwood was originally found to kill, stomach worms. That's what it was for.
Right.
There wasn't great refrigeration, so. The food that they ate gave them worms, and if you took wormwood, you were able to rid your body of that, of that ailment.
That's incredible. Well, I'm certainly glad I asked you about it. That's amazing.
Yeah, I am too. So I worked with a guy named Ted Brow, who does Lucid Absinthe, and a number of other ones that are just incredibly high quality absinthe, and they're extraordinarily expensive. And so I infused them with THC and made things like absinthe frappes, which are pretty amazing.
Wow.
Kind of like a mojito, but with absinthe.
That's incredible. I'm going to have to look into that. See, I've never had it. I've never had it here. When I say here, I mean in North America. I've been told you can't even get the real stuff here anyway. So I've never tried it.
No, you can. You can. No, that's not true. That's another lie.
So there is...
The absinthe that you get in the United States or Canada is the exact same absinthe that you get in Europe. There's no difference.
Wow. Huh. Okay, well, that's going to be of interest too.
There's no difference at all. In fact, the ones that you want to kind of stay away from are the ones that are the shocking colors. Like La Fevert is the fluorescent green one.
Right.
You can get that in Nova Scotia, I know. Because, I know you can buy it up in Canada.
Wow.
It's absolutely the same liquid as comes from France or Switzerland. I would steer clear of the ones from like Czechoslovakia. They tend to be poorly made. Switzerland, there's some good ones from Switzerland. France probably has the best. It's all a matter of taste. But if it has a bright color of the liquid, steer away from it because that's artificial color.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, what's next
and
up?
if you're infusing, of course, you're heating. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, that's okay. What's next up for you? What's your next big event? I mean, we barely got to you pinned down here.
Next big event, next big event is Tales of the Cocktail down in New Orleans, and I think this is going to be my last year. I'm tired of being dissed for a Spirited Award. And, I'm not represented by PR, so I don't have the big money spend that everyone has. And I don't use ghostwriters like so many of the books are ghostwritten that have been nominated and have actually won awards. Ghostwritten books, I just don't get it. I mean, I write for a living, so I can't understand paying someone else to write for me. But, go figure.
What is what's this award you're not winning?
The award is the Spirited Award at Tales of the Cocktail for the best cocktail book.
Oh, okay.
And I've been dissed I was nominated in 2013, and that was the last time I heard from them. So.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And my books are truly bestsellers. I mean, they sell thousands and thousands of copies, and more than anyone else. I just don't get it, but that's okay. I don't have to be liked by everyone, and I certainly don't have to, win any awards to be part of the club, because I don't want to be part of the club. I'm already, when I work with weed, that changed everything in alcohol.
You're what they used to call a maverick. That's what they used to call people like you.
I am absolutely a maverick, but and I'm just doing what I love and what I'm passionate about, and following my dreams, and hopefully I don't go bankrupt again. And I'm living my life as I see fit.
Well, I hope that my pathway crosses yours at some point, because I meet so many fantastic people in this industry and in this series of realizations. I sure would like to get a chance to have an evening with Warren Bobrow's whatever's in your mind that day. It would be so great.
Oh my gosh, I'd be so honored. I mean, they say I have a great face for radio, but I really would love to meet you in person, so I have a chance to clasp your hand and say you aren't wrong by having me on your show.
Well, thanks very much. You don't need promotion. You've got your own self-promotion. It's Warren Bobrow, folks.
You have to.
He's the mixologist of all things cannabis, and he knows the whole mess. So get onto his page, get onto Amazon. That's all it was, just a rotten nightmare. Now we know the real stuff. So check him out all over the place. Everything is going to be fine.
I really appreciate it.
So glad you came on, and we're looking forward to. I'm going to get Kim set up for the task. We've got some American trip to make. We'll have to hook up with you somehow. But I'm so looking forward to it, Warren. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
It's my pleasure, my brother. I can't wait to meet you.
All right, you too. Be well and travel safely.
Cheers. Thank you.
That's Warren Bobrow, everybody. Fantastic. Now he is, I don't know exactly where his next thing is going to be, but imagine just bringing forth everything you like about yourself, taking your own skill set. This guy was a mixologist of all things booze. And once you learn a certain amount of that stuff, you're going to have to, and then apply it to cannabis. That's your skill set that you're bringing to your different existence, which is kind of interesting. But for now, let's do a little commercial here. We have to do this. I've got good news. Check out our producer, Kim Sakamoto. You've probably heard me refer to Kim on and off the show several times. Kim is featured on a new podcast on Podbean called Your Highness Podcast. It's called the Your Highness Podcast. Hosts Diana and, it's one host, sorry. Diana and Kim discuss the challenges of being a content creator in the cannabis space, whatever that means. Oh yeah, this is content right now. So she produces my show and does the social media aspect of presenting it to the world as well. She's very good at it. It became evident that we weren't going to be able to keep her only to ourselves, and Kim has gone off and formed her new business, K-Star Marketing and PR. So this is a good commercial for me, because this is a commercial where I can, I actually endorse and use the product being mentioned, which I have so far done with every sponsor that has had anything to do with the show at this point. But do check this out. Once again, Your Highness Podcast on Podbean. And, yeah, that's what that is. So we can understand that that is available online and forever, like so many of these. Now we're just tucking into the final chunk of the show. I'm still having my head blown about absinthe. Listen to this article. I can't read the whole thing because it's so long, but I'm going to read some of it because it's so great. This is from policyalternatives.ca. Now, this is regarding Canada's new cannabis system, and I know there are a lot of people around the world listening in to us to find out what it is we're doing. A lot of people think it's great, but there are certainly some drawbacks here. So, written by this person, John Akpata. Okay, so it says, a longtime marijuana activist tries to make sense of Canada's new cannabis capitalism. I find myself poised between astonishment and outrage at the miserable marijuana monstrosity that's been bred by the Trudeau government and sold to doting Canadians as, quote, legalization. You might think that legalization without decriminalization is paradoxical, that one cannot exist without the other. You might believe that law is based on logic and facts. My skeptical nature had me anticipating that legalization actually meant financialization. That is, a regulated framework of legal and financial engineering that would create a new series of aristocrats. The Canadian marijuana entrepreneur. My healthy distrust of government had me predicting that legalization would also continue to oppress and criminalize minorities and the poor. 2 years ago, I speculated it's going to get worse before it gets better, and now Bills C-45 and C-46 are slouching towards Ottawa to be born. Well, they're already going through. Of course, this was written on March 1st, so they're going through and they've made changes. The senators have made changes. The government rejected 14 or 15 of those or so. Send it back to the Senate. It's bouncing around like a ping pong ball and making just as much sense, trajectory-wise. This fella has been a member of the Marijuana Party since 2004, has run in the last 5 federal elections, and currently is a peace officer for the party. I've had to consistently deconstruct the flawed thinking of reefer madness. I've had to face the Medusa of racism that hides in the history of Emily Murphy. I've had the slings and arrows of every Cheech and Chong joke. I've smiled at every Jimi Hendrix or Bob Marley reference. I've risked my personal and professional reputation by aligning myself with something that was thought to be immoral, dangerous, and criminal. The members of the Marijuana Party have been unified by one common ideology: cannabis should not be criminalized. Of course, we have a lot of police officers here that feel the other way around. Of course, a lot of those police officers are deeply invested into the companies that will be strictly and licensed producers selling this stuff. In order to defend this position, that cannabis should not be criminalized, I've had to study botany, science, and the policies of Health Canada and Veterans Affairs Canada and the law. I am now, as I have always been, in a bit of a haze at the reasoning of it all. So here's a well-studied man in a lot of different aspects, still can't make sense of it. That makes me feel better. Having marijuana or cannabis included in the schedule of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act and enforcing that with the criminal code is outrageous. It is non-logical. It defies the laws of nature, science, and the will of the people. I think this guy's been listening to my show. No, I'm not going to say that. It's just that I have said all of these things so many times. Of course, that's why this article caught my eye. I'm not the only one saying these things. I'm just the only one saying it on this show. Marijuana prohibition is a monster roaming the countryside that kicks indoors and takes property away, takes children away from their parents. Yeah. Got a big furor kicking around the States about that right now, but we've already got lots of policies, and Canada's already had lots of policies where children get taken away from their parents. Now they're acting like Trump's the first guy to ever do it. Handcuffs people and saddles them with a criminal record. Did I jump in there quick enough? It does, the policies. Oh yeah, handcuffs the people and saddles them with a criminal record. Humans become outcasts before they can apply for a pardon or a record suspension, as it's now called. Yet Bill C-45 is creating a monopoly for the rich, and Bill C-46 will let the police continue to beat down the poor. So I'm going to read some more of this next week. This great article. If you don't want to wait for that, go to policyalternatives.ca. Canadian Center for Policy Alternatives is what that means, and have this article at your desktop or your phone, March 1st, 2018, and the title is A longtime marijuana activist tries to make sense of Canada's new cannabis capitalism. That's John Akpata doing that. And great article, fantastic, very well written, for sure. So just on the way out, I will say that I'm very glad that Warren Bobrow was on the show tonight. Thank you very much. We are bringing on some guests we've had on before. Trying to line that up. We had one lined up, and he had a Brexit emergency session over there in England. Paul Flynn, the parliamentarian from the Labour Party. And regardless of your take on government, he is in the government. And he does have lots to say that's really refreshing and wonderful about cannabis. But next week we have a fantastic show. And we always have a fantastic show because I learn something every single week, and I'm always in here, doing it. But I'm very excited about next week's episode. Next week is going to embrace things of a comedic nature to do with cannabis. Raise your fists any way we can. So we'll see you next week on Green Crush Conspiracy Queries with Alan Park as the Clydesdale train of horses, bringing in the hope and understanding of the cannabis world is at hand, folks. And we will see you next week as it brings in even more information. This is Alan Park, Green Crush Conspiracy Queries, out.